Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokuskai Inside Look podcast, where I share inspiring stories of Budoka around the world. Please share your favorite episodes with your dojo and community so this effort can be spread to more corners of the earth. This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons over at Patreon. By donating as little as a cup of coffee to a bowl of ramen, they've directly made this podcast possible. If you're enjoying this work and can spare a small tip each month, it would mean a lot to me. I'll also be sharing the occasional behind-the-scenes clips and side initiatives that build on this podcast. You can find it at www.patreon.com/Tokuskai Canada. Thanks in advance for your support. And now, on to the interview. If you could just introduce yourself and talk about your practice outside of, we all here do EI or Kendo or both or all of them. But outside of that, what is it that you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Nathalie, and hi all. It's a long time I haven't seen you on a Saturday. So before I even started EI, I started practicing a modality called Reiki 15 years ago. So when I started with a very Western Reiki. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's really sold as an alternative therapy and hands-on healing. And I liked it very much. It was really about feeling, and it was very beautiful. But it felt wrong. Something was missing. So 7 years ago, I came in contact with a Japanese teacher of Reiki. And it was a completely different experience. It wasn't about channeling or masters or guides or spirits. It was really a simplified esoteric Buddhism practice. So it was more about not healing people and seeing angel. It was really about moving towards the path to enlightenment, obviously, probably in like 100 lifetimes. And in that practice really became all about the breath. And that is like, it was for me a gift. I come from a family where there was no good breath hygiene. And actually that's a concept I didn't even understand, breathing hygiene, right? So my whole family, they're smokers. I was a smoker. We always were breathing up to here. And my family is from Belgium, so everybody smoked everywhere. And then what happened to they smoked through their mouth. So I grew up being a very hyper person, very heady, with breathing here, smoking. And honestly, I had no idea that breath could have an impact in your life until 6 years ago when I started breathing through my belly. And that was a big discovery, the same discovery of the Hara. So I practiced Reiki for all these years, and then I started feeling very heavy. Reiki felt a very passive. And that's how I, one day walking my dog, I saw a lot of people dressed in Japanese outfits. I'm like, what is this? And I got into I to bring that same mindfulness of the breath that I have in stillness in Reiki to bring it into movement. And as I practice more both of them, the more I get in more and more linked because they're very similar at the core. So that's a little bit of my journey.
So before we get into the modern or the way that you're doing Reiki now and how you're using breath, let's just be a little more clear on what is because we have our assumptions on what Reiki is. We've heard about it. As you mentioned, there's this kind of Western ideal of like using energy to heal people. Could you explain a little more about the difference between what it was that you had been doing and then what you discovered in terms of like the individual practice, and also how do you use it with others?
Great. So the concept, when I learned Reiki, I was told it was an energy healing technique that channeled universal energy to bring balance at all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So it was a really hands-on healing. So you will place your hands on different parts of the body to bring balance, and you will get into a sort of meditative space to allow that to happen. So you will drop a little bit who you are, so you allow like almost connecting to the source. But they didn't have any breathing practice or anything, so it wasn't a very grounded practice. And if you meet many Western practitioners, they go into a lot of psychics and a lot of things because grounding is not part. So it was really sold as an energy healing modality. And again, 15 years ago, I wanted to just place my hands on people and make the pain go away. I have to accept that was the origin of my story, right? I didn't like people being unhappy. I'm like, oh, great, I place my hands and everything is solved. That didn't happen, and that doesn't happen in Reiki. So what I practice now is a completely different point of view. It has to do with energy, but think of it more of seme and kokoro, kind of energy versus I'm channeling universal energy, I don't know where from. So the practice I am now could be described as a spiritual practice that combines light touch and mindfulness to relax, but also to re-encounter your true self. And when we talk about true self, it's really remembering you are interconnected with everything. So it's really finding that interconnection and that more Buddhist sense that you're one with the universe is in you. And the gateway to the universe is in your hara. So most of my practices now are breathing into the hara different ways. There is, for example, I think you were, Patrick, with that exercise, there is zazen a little bit. Mostly there is a breath called Joshin Kokyoho, which means purifying the mind, heart, using the breath. And it's really about kind of like building the fire in the hara and then expanding it out. And then there is a lot of chanting as well. So we chant different mantras. A little bit, there's called a tradition called kotorama in Japanese, which is is chanting basically primal sounds to move the energy in your body. So you have different chants for different kind of build-up. So if you want to be more connected to the heavenly energy, you're going to sing something that has more A sounds in it. If you want to be more grounded, you're going to have more O and deep A sounds into it. So you have those different chants. So it's really, when it comes to breathing, it's really building mostly your hara, because then that opens up the rest of your energy. So I don't know if that was clear. I hope it was. If I ramble, bring me back.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful in dispelling, like, initially all of us, because of our exposure in the West right now to these Reiki, like, I have to use the word cults, because it just gets us to have a bad picture in our heads. So it really helps us to figure out that when you say that there was no grounding in that, it was more of a, they just try to make up something, and that's why it feels like a cult. Whereas when you're doing the practice, you're doing something physical, you're doing something for another reason.
Yeah, it's a thing that I'm trying to deal with. I'm bringing a new podcast of education. So people are really badly trained in Reiki. So they do 8 hours and they have a certification. When I told them it takes 10 years as a beginner in the eye, like Western Reikis will just laugh at me. So we have a small group that is growing, that is really going, again, it's more what we do is simplify esoteric Buddhism. Mikao Usui, the creator of Reiki, actually did some Yamabushi techniques. He did Zazen for many years. He studied with monks. He did martial arts as well. So a lot of his system is very simple, but again, it's so simple, but you need to repeat and repeat. And when they brought it to the West, the Japanese woman who did that, she's like, oh, people are not going to be wanting to work for this. She simplified, but she still had a lot of practice. But then through the years, they added the chakras, a lot of things, because if you don't have the depth of breath and practice, you cannot go very deep. And it's become a very new age thing versus what it was, a very traditional Japanese simplified Buddhism. So everybody could reach enlightenment, even if they didn't have the education to read the sutras. So that was the original goal of it.
Okay. So up until this point, our focus in this group and just in general on breathing has been very on the physical side. So whether it's practicing through yoga, whether it's our discussion with Ashley, that's breathing and singing. And last time we had a discussion with Hélène and Dominique about what's happening inside the body physiologically, molecularly, for breathing. But when you're explaining it, there's a lot more imagery involved and more kind of higher level thinking. Could you maybe go over, like, how does that fit into when you think about breathing practice using these images of the heavens, or like heat and cold and that stuff?
Okay, so let me, because if I ramble again, just let me know. I go a little bit like Sofia Vergara on steroids on base, so just bring me down. And also if my accent becomes too sick, also I'll slow down. So in Reiki, and it's a little bit like, again, yeah, right? When you talk about traditional Japanese Reiki, we have heaven and earth. So earth is everything on this plane, is the physical. Heavenly is obviously the connection to the source. So it's basically duality and non-duality, right? And non-duality will be completely dropping the self in the spiritual sense. So you're finally enlightened. So we need both to function in this earth. And the link through those is the breath. So when it's basically the breath is the link between mind and body. And when I mean mind is the Japanese sense of mind, which is more kokoro, right? Heart mind. So the breath is really the thing that allows you to bring enlightenment to the body, or like to have consciousness and body work together. So you can do that as images of heaven and earth, or you can just think also something called Sanmitsu, which is the 3 mysteries of the Buddha. And it's very similar. It's just like mind, body, and speech. But if you think about it, speech is really breath. So breath is the bridge so that you can have all that energy in your body and be able, for example, in the eye, how do you project seme? You know, really through building it through the breath into your body and then expanding it out. So that is a little bit, there is a lot of imagery, it depends how you meditate. So, and again, I do some meditations that are not strictly Reiki. My mentor actually has gone to Japan, and I went to Japan to train last year. So it's really how do you use the breath as an anchor. So you're tied to your body, and once you are anchored in your body, you can open your mind like a sky without closed, like completely expanded. So we have some meditations that are really just very breath focused, like just being aware of your breath, but not on the throat, not on a specific point. You want to learn to move with the breath, right? You want to feel the breath, become one with the breath. So there is also no static. So you don't want to build in Reiki the breath, the attention on the upper side. If you decide to have a point, it should be the hara. But ideally, the breath will be moving and your mind will be moving with the breath, because when your mind and the breath are aligned, you're aligning with the body. Also, because if you just keep it in one point, your energy becomes very heavy. So for example, when I was training with Zazen in Japan, we will mix hours of Zazen, which is really placing most part of your attention always in the hara to anchor, to then let go of the mind. But then we will chant, because the monk will say, if you breathe too much in the hara, just the hara, you'll become, he would say like, because his English, he basically was non-existent. So you need to combine it with either more visuals. So for example, how do you clear your central channel, your spine? You imagine light going up and down, right? So you can use visuals for that. Or again, you do chanting, which is not very visual, but it allows that energy that you built into the hara to move and to be more flexible. So beyond heaven and earth, we also work a little bit with the balance of flexible and firm. So how can you be solid but supple? So again, you see all the references to AI, right? How can I be a person who has boundaries, but I'm not rigid? How can I be compassionate, but not an enabler? So that you do having a breath that is very grounded, but not heavy. And let me know if I'm talking very abstract.
Actually, if you could explain, like, I can kind of get the sense of like heaviness, and you also mentioned the word anchor, something that keeps you here in the physical self. But then when you use the word enlightenment, I don't know really what that means in terms of like anchor in the physical body, being aware of the breath. When we're doing meditation, part of that is to be more aware. But then this other part about going out there or being enlightened, could you explain that part a little more?
Yeah, so enlightenment is a goal, and it's not something that probably is easy to reach unless you are like, again, the Buddha, or like someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, who's probably very close to that state where there is no individual self. They're fully interconnected. So imagine, and this is hard, but you know how in the eye we say you have to be aware of the techie in the front, in the back. So imagine taking that and becoming one with your techie. You are so connected to your techie that you know exactly what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and then you realize the techie is just yourself. Like there is no difference between you and the techie, right? The enemy. So that is a little bit of what you're looking for enlightenment. There is, you can feel the room. You are the room where you're doing the eye. You are the enemy you're fighting. So that is a little, it's a simplified way of enlightenment. I cannot really tell you what enlightenment is because I'm not even close to have a hint of it. I can describe it like, for example, sometimes I don't feel me. There is no me. So it's really a dropping of the self. It has happened very seldom to me, seconds, but I can tell you sometimes I get into the room and everything slows down and there is no difference between the sword and myself. There is no difference between like Parker Sensei and myself. So that is a deep sense of interconnection. When you reach the sense of interconnection to a point where there is no individual me, there is no fear, there is no anger, there is no worry, then you're enlightened. And in a simplified way, if you think about it, on the road towards enlightenment, it's really about dropping worry and anger and reconnecting with gratitude and compassion. And again, compassion, the Buddhist sense, not compassion the way we see it in the West. So that is probably the way you want to do it. And you can use the breath, for example, to drop anger. Why are we angry? Because all of the energy is on our head and we're going, right? Or sometimes you feel like the fire going up. So you can use the breath to really ground yourself, to stabilize your energy so it doesn't go crazy up there And that is also not so much bubbling, right? So you are like centered, square, almost like instead of being a triangle, most of us are like this because we watch TV, we read, we think, we watch the phone. So how do you bring that energy to be very stable in your hips? So then you don't get as angry. How do you stop worrying? Pretty much the same, right? Just bringing this down through the breath where it should be. And those are things like, how are you more present? For example, when you are enlightened, which I'm nowhere near close to, but we talk about letting go of the past and the future, but also the present. So a lot of times we talk about, in EI especially, right? We need to let go of the past and the future. We don't need to anticipate. But actually, it's even about letting go of the present. What you're doing, not even being conscious of time. So it's really letting go of all those linear perceptions we have in this plane and expanding the mind beyond that. And it's really difficult to understand because most of us have not experienced it. So we have just, we have either very slight experiences or just a description of other people.
Okay. So what it sounds like too is that the breathing is just part of when we're doing it, we're using it to achieve something else that we're trying to get at, which is, I think for me, the thing that really helps me understand it is the dropping of the self, because I think we've all been in those states where we're doing something where it just feels really easy. I think one term that's used is flow, or I don't know if there's another term, but like you just realize everything just coming easy. You're just in the work and you don't realize that you're paying attention to what you're doing. But in those sense, like breathing can help us get there. When you're doing that practice, is there an improvement of the usage of breath? Because similarly, when we're doing kendo or iaido or any of these martial arts, we're using the breath to improve whatever technique we're doing or our situation. But there's very little focus on how do we know whether or not we're breathing properly and better, and how do we just practice improving the breath? And that's what kind of this session has been about. These sessions is to, let's focus on this just one thing so that we can try to get better at it, and then we can bring it back. When you're doing the Reiki practice or the meditation, is there work to say, oh, well, the breathing you're using right now is not as good as it could be, so this is how you can improve?
Yes, but without so much emphasis on improving. So I think the difference is you just breathe for years and you notice the difference. So you basically, and you learn two things: not to be attached to what you're doing and not to fix it, just breath as an exploration. So what we do, for example, Reiki, I've been practicing Joshin Kokiho, this very deep belly hara building meditation for 6 years, right? So so often I get a new, wow, I'm going deeper. Oh, my shoulders are going down. So it's an improvement, but you shouldn't be sitting just for improving. You're just sitting to practice like that. The practice is just sitting and breathing. But you do, honestly, I do feel an improvement. When I started this, again, I mostly had like breathing through my mouth. I couldn't breathe very deeply. And now I can breathe very deeply. I'm starting to even breathe towards the ribs and towards the back of my thoracic and like my lower thing. Sorry, I'm not really good with anatomy, but my lower back, right? So, and I'm dropping to levels of concentration. It used to take me 10 to 15 minutes to be able to calm down with this breath. I can now calm down and center and focus in 3 breaths. When it comes to Reiki practice, I basically don't do a lot of sessions because it stresses me out because people want like to be healed in a session. But when I don't move very much, I just breathe. And people is like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just being present and breathing. When it comes to AI, I do feel the difference, especially this year that we've been basically by ourselves. I have a little bit of ADHD, so it's difficult for me sometimes in the dojo to pay attention. But I can feel after a year of paying attention through my breath, using it as a link between my body and my mind to understand what I'm doing wrong with kata, like it's really improving the way I'm moving. My hips are more grounded, they're more on the floor, and I can direct the breath where I want, so I can loosen and soften whatever movement I'm trying to do. So it's really about repetition, and there is, I said instead of improvement, a bigger depth. So you go deeper into it. And it does work because some of you have seen me testing. I'm not great with technique, but every time I pass, because I have a big presence and they don't understand how I can be so sloppy in my technique, but have presence. And it's basically because I've been doing my Joshin Kokyo breath for half an hour, and you learn how to blast your presence and your energy in the room, even if I'm not able to do that. So I don't know if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, go into more detail. There's two things that you mentioned besides the blasting the presence. I'm just interested in what are you thinking, what's going through your head, or what do you feel when that's happening? The other thing you mentioned was bringing the breath to specific parts of your body to allow that to move. Because when I've done some yoga in the past, it's the same thing. Like if you feel some place that you're stretching out that feels very tight, bringing breath to that location actually physically helps it, even though it's like your breath actually isn't going there because it's just blood that's going there. So could you talk about those two things a little more and what's going on? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
So I'll start with this latter one because it's easier to describe. So basically, and this has to do a little bit with the capacity to exhale longer. So the exhalation of your breath is what relaxes. So the inhale basically energizes your nervous system, the exhalation relaxes. So you take an inhale, but you want to take it all the way to your belly, again, to the hara, right? And again, you're doing the double thing. You're really calming down your mind, and then you're exhaling slowly, relaxing, and using the breath to place your awareness there. So when you place your awareness using the breath, or you can just send your mind somewhere, right? If you have a good kinetic sense, which most of you probably do, what happens when you place your mind there, where the mind goes, the energy goes. And again, this is Reiki practice. You know, I don't know how much science there is behind it, but quantum physics probably will agree with that. So when you place your mind somewhere, the energy goes there, there is a flow of blood or whatever you want to say. But basically, it's almost like if someone is misbehaving and you look at them and they stop, that's what happens with your body, right? So the first thing is you're aware of how tense your shoulder is. And I'm using my left shoulder because it's always like this, right? So when I place my awareness in my shoulder, I'm like, wow, shoulder, you're so tense. It's a way of doing that. It's a way of carrying and supporting your shoulder, and the shoulder lets go. So for me, it's really an awareness tool of my body where it is, and then using that exhale, lengthening that exhale as much as I can to tell my nervous system, you're safe. There is no need for your shoulder to be like that. There is no real person that is going to come with a katana and cut you in pieces, right? So relax, soften. But mostly you're also connecting your brain to your shoulder using the breath so you can send a message. I have a very poor kinetic sense, so this is almost like my Telegram or my email or my text system, right? Hey, shoulder, it's okay, relax. You can do that with pain as well. So a lot of the times when we have pain, we avoid it. But actually, if you really feel the pain and place your awareness, you're going to feel like, first of all, more pain. And then it actually is going to vanish a little bit because there is your energy or there is your mind, your awareness, either supporting and helping. And I really, again, I feel it with my Reiki practice with my clients. Sometimes they come in pain from chemo or from back pain and they leave after an hour, you know, without pain, but they probably suffer a lot for 15 minutes when my hands were placed there because their awareness is there. It's not me doing a miracle. I'm placing my hands, I'm holding the space, but their mind is where my hands are. So they're processing that pain. So that is probably the best explanation. It also helps, for example, a lot with foot pain or with fear before testing. What happens with fear when we're going to test? We don't want to be afraid, right? So I'm not afraid, I'm strong. What happens? You become brittle. If you breathe in, I'm afraid, and you exhale long, and you actually don't fight the fear, you realize fear is just another energy you can actually channel. Then what happens? That fear, you inhale the fear, you send it to your whole body and you exhale it out, it comes out as seme, right? Because it's almost like it's just energy. It's just either going too fast or it's a perception. So how do you accept that it's just energy? So you breathe into your fear. It's okay to be afraid. There is nothing wrong with it. And then, wow. And then as you breathe in, because you process, you accept it, it starts to almost vanish, right? Because fear is a message like, hey, we're in danger here. Like there's 7 people looking at you and you don't know what you're doing, right? So, but then when you say like, it's okay. So what? I'm afraid, and you breathe into it and you don't fight it, then it becomes part of your whole body and it's not going to hide into a weird left hand that is not moving or a foot that lost its balance. And again, you also use your breath to send all that energy to your hara so you don't lose your balance when you're standing up or down. So that is probably a very simplified explanation. What I feel is a little bit different. Again, I have for like 6 years of Reiki, it's 15, but it's really 6 of very deep Reiki. In my case, I start losing the fear because I see everybody very human, and sometimes I see the connection with the senseis. What happens to me when we're testing, when I do that breathing the right way and I have time and I'm not the first one in the line, I realize actually the senseis are exactly in the same position I am. They actually want me to pass. And this sounds very corny, but through the breath, almost I get into a rhythm with them and I feel supported during my test. I feel like there is nothing to fear, so the fear and anger go away. But most of that, I feel interconnected, so I'm not alone in front of a bunch of strangers. We're all practicing together. So I feel a sense of community. And I would say loving kindness, even though it sounds very corny, but you know, it's more of a like, we're all humans together having an experience that is beautiful. And we use in Reiki a lot of inner light. We're all sharing our light. And that is very difficult to describe. It's very peaceful and it takes really your fear away, but it's all through building the hara. So again, sorry if I go very woo-woo a little bit.
That's very cool, because what it's really helping me imagine too, as you're speaking about it, is we want to build connection with something, whether it's part of our body, whether it's an emotion like fear, or whether it's with the senseis that might be judging us. So to build this kind of connection where we can be aware of this body part or this emotion, we need something. And up until this point, if anyone were to ask me anything, I have no idea. Like there's nothing that connects everyone besides in the terms of our body, it would be the blood, and that's what's carrying the oxygen, which is what, like from 2 weeks ago, we're discussing this physiologically. It's what gives us life. It's what gives us energy. And then same thing, like with anyone else, if we're trying to connect with another human being, they have the same thing. And it's actually, this reminds me of something else that happens is when a woman gives birth, the baby initially, when they're touching the mom, is connected through like the heartbeat and the breath rate too. So they'll naturally come in sync with each other. And I've noticed this too when Natsuki was a kid, that she was very connected with Hannah's emotional state. So if Hannah was very nervous, then Natsuki would get nervous, but it would show up in a different way. So it seems like there is something, and the only thing that you could really see is the movement of the breath.
Yeah, and it's very beautiful. Think of it as like tuning fork, right? We're all tuning forks. So as you say, like if the mother is like this, even if the kid is like this, you will join towards the same rhythm. So as human beings, as community, we're like designed to vibrate together, and it can be breathing together, it can be whatever description. We have separated that a little bit, especially in modern times. So then really when we're together, if you drop the fear and the anger, it's easy to come together as a community again. And the feeling can be really one about, again, it's really loving kindness. There is no other way to describe. It's being able to, we have a symbol in Reiki, which is called daikomyo. So big, bright light. And the idea of the practice of Reiki is that you can actually open like Dai, which is the little man character. And what it means is a man who's not afraid to show whoever, a woman, like a human, who they are under heaven and earth. And for me, that is both beautiful for AI and Reiki. Like, can I be 100% who I am and also not get attached to whatever label of what I think I am, let go of all those labels and just show myself vulnerable and naked in front of other people without fear. And I think that is what we're doing with AI too, right? Can I do my best movement? Can I express AI in the best way I can, my own way, without being afraid of anyone, right? Of dying, of not passing the test. And for me, those are two things. And what's happening is I'm finding more movement in the stillness of Reiki, right? And I'm finding stillness in AI that I never expected to find. When very, very seldom when I'm in that flow that you mentioned, and for me, imagine moving through life with that flow all the time. Like I let go of like, am I doing this technique right or wrong? Like I let go of everything and it's just so beautiful, but I'm very still even though moving. So that I love the cross reference of those two. And I don't know, I'm also interviewing hopefully soon someone who's done both EI for 50 years and Buddhism and Reiki for 50 years. So if I get that interview, I'll share that with you as well.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. So at this point, I want to just see if anyone else has any specific questions from the group that they might want to raise.
So if I were accompanying you to Japan when you went there for training, what would it look like to me if I were observing you training there in a day? What would I see you doing?
You will be very bored.
Okay.
So basically, I live like a Zen monk for 3 weeks. So I live in a Zendo. So you basically have like a meditation pod where you sleep and live and do everything. So you will see me waking up at 5 in the morning with a gong, very miserably going into 1 hour of Zazen, which is a sitting meditation where you use the cosmic mudra, which is basically, again, a symbol of unity with everything, but you place it in your hara. So part of your mind is always in your hara, and then you're supposed to really open up, allowing your thought to flow like clouds, but not getting distracted, right? So you're really, how can you be open and expanded without being distracted? So I will do that for an hour in silence. Sometimes the monk will read a little bit of a sutra. Then we will do chanting for an hour, and you will be horrified because I'm getting better, but I was a horrible chanter. And then we will actually do breakfast like with the bowls. So it's almost like a choreography of how to use the bowls, eat and chant sutras. You will not speak. It was a eating meditation. Then I will clean the whole Zen, I was going to say dojo. And you're supposed again to use the breath to be mindful, to make cleaning into a breathing meditation as well, which sometimes I had a podcast hidden, but he didn't know. And then you will basically have 2-3 hours of free time to study or walk the mountains. So I was in a monastery it was the only thing in a huge mountain in front of another sacred mountain. Then we will meditate from 5 to 7, have dinner, meditate from 7:30 to 9, and go to bed so no internet, nothing. It was really basically 5 hours of Zazen and 1 hour of chanting. And chanting, we don't do it a lot in the West. It's a very different chanting than the Indian chanting. It's not so singy, it's very monotonous. It's really like Namakusamanda ba, Saranansenda ba, like that. And the idea is so that you become almost like in a kind of trance, but you also have to be aware. And I think also it's very beautiful because when you chant, you inhale very fast and you exhale for a long time chanting, right? They're very long chants. You're not supposed to cut them. And what happens, talking about losing the fear, that's a big part of Reiki and Buddhism. When you chant, you're going to run out of air, especially me. I didn't have I've been building my breathing practice, but I'm not a 60-year-old monk who's been chanting for 40 years. So as you chant, you run out of air. You learn how to lose the fear of running out of breath. But that for them also, again, they're advanced. It means you're losing the fear of dying. So there is a lot of practice of that, of like, how can you be one with everything, cleaning everything, be more mindful of your everyday life, but also how can you lose your fear of dying through chants or using, again, the breath as an example. So yeah, you have been very, very bored. And I look like a mess after a week, but we didn't care.
And was there any time where you were applying call it the treatment aspect of Reiki to another person?
Not in the monastery. So again, Reiki is very seen as a hands-on healing. Again, that is a very Western, and believe me, it's amazing. My hands get really hot, you get relaxed, like it's a beautiful experience. When you go to traditional Reiki, you learn to see it different. And we talk about being Reiki 24/7. If you go to Japan, everything has Reiki, right? It means basically life force. So when you are there, you basically, what you do is you almost like use your energy from the whole body. So you support the space. So instead of using my hands, I just use my breath. So I inhale, I connect with my hara, which is supposedly the gateway to the universe. And then when I exhale, I expand my energy, and that expansion grows. So your hara, which is like this, can become as big as to englobe yourself, or like, hold the space for someone else who's meditating. And then you can actually, the idea is you grow up the way that is unlimited, that you can expand your hara and just get lost with everything. So there, what we did at the Zen monastery was holding the space for each other. And you could feel it when the monk was there. He wasn't always there because he was married and he would come a few days. We all meditated longer and deeper because he had such a grounded presence and he was holding the space for us. And so we will go deeper. And if you do meditation by yourself and then you've done meditation in a group, if it's a good group, you're going to feel you go deeper and it's easier because you're all holding the space. So my Reiki practice has become more a lot of holding the space without hands than using my hands, almost like the hands are the training wheels in a way. So it's a very different take on Reiki practice, and it's very similar to Buddhism and the way the monk hold the space for us, but he didn't touch. Yeah, we didn't do any Reiki per se.
So when does that application aspect occur? Maybe not in the training in Japan. Is that more in the States somewhere?
In the States, so there, I use it for two things. I use it basically to I used to, before the pandemic, do some sessions in person. So I, myself as a practitioner, I specialize on people who were enduring either chemo treatment or were on the last stages of cancer, because it brings a very peaceful state and relaxation. It also helps with the side effects. And it's not magic. When your body is relaxed, the lymph does more detox. So, you know, your nervous system goes into rest and restore. So I work mostly with that. Also because people here in New York are not touched very, like a lot of people are lonely and the only touch they get is like people putting needles or operating them. So that caring touch and that loving touch without judgment and without trying to fix them is really beneficial for them. So that was most of my practice. I also specialize in mentoring other Reiki students. So there is a ritual called Reiju, which is spiritual blessing. And it's basically where we connect, we try as much as we can as practitioners and teachers to drop the self and become that big bright light. When that happens with someone who is also in a meditative space, you basically feel a very sense of becoming one. It's a very beautiful experience. It's very difficult to describe in words. Sometimes people feel very loved. A common description is that you feel home. You feel no fear, nothing. You just feel amazingly good. There is a lot of warmth. So that is also applied in that sense of training people and teaching people how to practice this. Personally, my mission is becoming more about letting go of that Western idea of Reiki, of people really having a grounding practice. I'm meeting many Reiki practitioners who are losing their jobs or they're going very emotional because they get this big influx of energy, but they don't have the roots, right? So it's the same. If we have a heavy sword and we don't have a strong core and we don't have strong hips, we cannot handle it. So and my mission has been to really educate people and really teaching more the meditation side of Reiki, using the breath. What is a hara? How can you be stable and actually then have a steady practice and hold the space versus trying to fix everybody? But yeah, and with the pandemic, it's been difficult. So it's been really teaching online more the breathing part. Let me know if I answer, because again, I get all excited and I just don't want to, I know sometimes I go to the side.
No, I appreciate you conveying that. I don't know, maybe it was 15 years ago, I took a Reiki, it was like a one-day Reiki workshop here in Rochester. And it was very much in that domain that you were explaining, like very short period of training. And it just seemed kind of shallow a little bit. So I didn't have much expectation today listening to you talk about it, but this is a whole different domain of or expression of Reiki than I had expected.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I honestly, it was the right thing for me, that first training. We're having a discussion as a community. How can we allow people with 16 hours of training to go and hold the people with trauma, right? So there is that discussion. For me, I take it really as a spiritual practice. It makes me live my life with more compassion, happier. If I can help other people do that. I teach it as Japanese mindfulness incorporations as well. So, but yeah, it's the Reiki we're learning, and the one you heard, like 95% of people are trained in that Reiki, Western Reiki, but the origins and the root of it are really, really beautiful once you start, you know. But again, we were separate from Japan with the war. So those practices were not back until probably 10 years ago, and people are resisting them because they mean commitment, they mean practicing every day. They means that you're breathing and some days you don't see angels or roses, you're just breathing. So it's a little bit like Yai. You need to really love Yai, because it's not like you get like, oh my God, I did this amazing cat after 2 months, right? Some days are really hard even after 10 years of training. So for me, they're very similar practices, and most people are not attracted to traditional Reiki because of that. So now perhaps I can send you a book. Perhaps you will enjoy it then.
Yeah. Anyone else have something that they want to ask? Peter?
So I'm building this Venn diagram of where we know in science and some of the things that you were saying. So there's a lot of things that I'm like connecting. The heaven thing, in science, we don't have this heaven, like a spiritual or anything like that, because you can't really predict it. You can't analyze it. You can't quantify it. But things like when you're saying, I want to breathe down into my stomach, I want to breathe down. I think it's, as humans, we kind of want to have, we can't understand things in a mechanistic way, right? It doesn't really, like, as humans, we don't do a really good mechanism, like understanding it in that mechanistic way as you would do in science. But when you say, okay, I'm going to breathe down, I'm going to breathe into my ribs, I can breathe. I think what you're doing is you're making your breathing system more efficient, larger, right? You're strengthening muscles that you never used before. So you're getting a better breath in just by trying to image, just by holding that image. So that was kind of my thing. And also, it always brings me to this joke of the Buddhist going to the hot dog stand. You've heard it, right?
I think I say that I think I heard it, yeah.
So the Buddhist monk goes to the hot dog stand and says, make me one with everything. So, okay. And he gives him a $20 bill. So the hot dog vendor makes him one with everything and gives it to him. Starts eating his hot dog, and then the Buddhist monk says, wait, where's my change? The vendor says, change comes from within.
Oh, that's such a cute, but it is true. Now I want a hot dog. No, it is very true. And I think I love what you said about like how you push, the breathing down. If in science, because part of me is also like, I'm a little bit obsessed with quantum physics and science, even though I'm like a little lazy when it comes to reading. But basically you're also connecting the different brains, right? So in Reiki, we have 3 centers, which is the forehead, the heart, and the belly. So you have, it's basically, we call them heaven, heart, and earth, but you actually have a big nervous system. So when you use the breath to breathe in and down, you're also using your belly to relax that gut brain that we have. That is non-verbal, but a lot of the fear and those gut reaction are from all the 100 million kind of neurons you have in your gut brain. So when you breathe really deeply, you're massaging them. And when you're using your breath to connect to that center, you're also giving an option to those neurons to send a signal, because they're non-verbal, to your other brain. So it's also, as you say, like you have, instead of using this nervous system, you're starting to use your whole body, you're using your whole nervous system, so you can process information faster and you have more energy, right? You're using your whole body. The more you use the breath to bring the whole body into your practice, you're not just using whatever strength you have on a foot or on an arm, you're using your whole body because it's integrated. So I love that take on science.
Yeah, I think that's, what was I just holding on to and then I forgot? Oh, sorry. I was just thinking of something that was, all right, now I lost it.
Oh, sorry.
If I can say one thing, yeah, I didn't realize. Well, the name of the place you went in Akita Ken.
Yeah.
Of course, Kamada Sensei, my sensei, is from Akita Shine, from the city, so that's his hometown. And to hear that there's, and it's Chozenji is the name of the Zendo there.
It was, it was in Chokai-san, so it was in the sacred mountain of Chokai-san.
Yeah.
So it was a Chokai-san monastery, but yeah, it was Yashimamachi, so it was a town like an hour away from Akita-shi.
Yeah. So
and go ahead.
That's a nice connection, and it's Soto, so
yeah.
I understand a little bit of that. But the one gesture you made sort of spoke volumes to me, and you went like this, and then you went like that. Yeah. And I think that speaks to me. Yeah. This idea and changing, well, being able to understand this one. Yeah. So
Yeah.
speaks volumes. speaks volumes to me. Yeah, picture is 1,000 words right there for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if no one else has other questions, I want to end with, maybe you could, you talked about you were doing this breathing practice before grading or a Shiai, and you were doing this building up this so that when you were performing, you had this seme or this presence. Can you walk us through what that practice is, what that exercise is? What are you doing?
Absolutely. So do you want to practice now, or should I just describe it so you can do it on your own?
Well, you said you were doing that, what, 30 minutes? Maybe just, yeah.
I'll just let you know how to do it. And I can then send you also the drawing, because I did, and I had a tough time when I started with Reiki meditation to understand. So I did a lot of drawings and diagrams so people can do them. So I'm happy to share that as well after in an email. So Joshin Kokyoho, again, it literally means the method of using the breath to purify the heart mind. So what you're going to do, you're going to sit again in a very stable position, and you want your hips to be a little above your knees. So if you're cross-legged, like you will need like a meditation cushion or a yoga block. If you're sitting on a chair, you may want to put a little bit of a pillow. And then if you're sitting on a chair, you want your feet to be really on the ground. So because again, this is a very grounding meditation. Hands have to be like a palm up. And sorry, for those of you who want to see, you want them to have them close to your hara, because what you're creating is a ball almost like to hold the energy, right? So you're really creating, you're becoming, again, if we want to become like this, we need to accumulate energy there. So palms are facing up, creating a ball where your hara is. And as with every meditation, the hard part is like having the spine like the obi. It has to be straight and active, but not tense. You know, it has to be the right thing. So chin in, so the head rests above the head. So really going into meditation pose, relaxing the shoulders. And then the first thing you want to do is to just breathe a little bit, inhaling out and then exhaling, contracting the breath towards the spine. So you want to inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And what you're creating with that breath is a bellow effect. You're building fire in the hara. So it's a little bit of a different breath. And you really, at the beginning, then it becomes more normal. You want to push it, at least for the few first breaths, the first minute. You really want to exaggerate that movement, because that is the first, like, okay, I'm letting go of the day. I'm bringing a big thing down. And again, building that fire. Then it's going to be more normal, but you still want to act like push that belly out on the inhale and then contract in the exhale. And then you want to also include a little bit hold between them. So as you inhale, you're going to inhale through the nose, mouth closed. If you want to have the tongue on the back of the tooth or whatever is fine, but you can relax the tongue as long as you're really inhaling, exhaling through the nose. So inhaling through the nose, and you're going to follow that breath with your mind all the way down to the hara, and you want your breath and your mind to go there together. The end of the inhale is when your mind is in the hara. And then as you hold and exhale, you're going to feel that breath coming out of your body through every pore, right? So one way to make it easier is you inhale light, right? You visualize a light going down your throat, chest, all the way down to the hara. It becomes a sphere of light. And as you exhale, that sphere grows from everywhere and is bigger than you. So inhale light, follow it, follow it, follow it. And then see that sphere of light becoming bigger, 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 bigger on the exhale. So basically that's it. You inhale and then you become very focused, grounded. And then as you exhale that sphere of light, you're expanding your presence. So the beauty of this breath is many times we're either very focused and very dense, or we're very expanded, but we're not dense. So what you're practicing is really almost like a muscle to be able to expand your energy, but with density, right? Not scattered, not like, you're going to be like, and you start with 5 minutes, and then the second week you build up to 10 minutes, and then you keep it at a minimum of 15 minutes a day. If you want to do more, fine. But with 15 minutes a day, after probably 3 weeks, you start feeling already like the effect. Like in my case, I laugh because at work, like when people go petty, I don't take it personal anymore, right? That was the first thing I felt. And let me know if that is clear. And again, I'll send you the how-to. I also practice it every Tuesday and Thursday online for free at 8 in the morning. So anyone wanting to join or having the replay is good. But it's basically that: inhaling, mind to the hara, exhaling out through every pore of your body.
Yeah, I can already immediately just a little bit of practice here could feel the difference in that when you're just about to go into something that you're a little bit afraid or anxious about, then you tighten up in the chest and everything else. Like I always feel like my hands and my feet are super cold. There's nothing there to actually, like, makes it very hard for me to move the sword or move my body. But when you're doing this kind of breath, it feels like it's relaxing everything. And it's also bringing awareness to pretty much everywhere, because if you're thinking all your pores, including your legs and feet. And then just like we were talking about earlier, when you bring your attention to a place, it seems like that place relaxes or gets some kind of energy. And actually, probably when Hélène and Dominique are back again, we ask her about the physiology. I would love to actually just pick your brains on whether or not when you bring your mind's attention to something, does that physically change anything? Like, does that actually bring more blood to that area, or just what happens? So we'll ask you that question. You can have some time to think about it. But yeah, thank you so much, Nathalie, for joining us today and answering our questions.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you, and we'll see you on Tuesday, probably.
I'll be there.
Yep.
Take care. Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
See
Thank you.
12.
Oh, yeah. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode, because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is brought to you by our amazing patrons over at Patreon. If you are enjoying this work, please consider supporting me at patreon.com/Tokuskai Canada. To contribute to this effort, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at tokuskai.canada, or subscribe to our newsletter at subscribe@tokuskai.ca. Until next time, thanks for listening.